and welcome to episode number 80 of the Lines podcast. My name is Matt Brown, joined each and every week by Brett Collson and FairwayJay, where we run down all of the big bets, all the big news, all of the gambling industry comings and goings, which has been pretty interesting this week for sure, guys. We are on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. Please go in, subscribe, rate and review. We really do appreciate all of those. And of course, you can follow us on the Twitter machine at TheLines US and at PlayPicks US. We're going to talk the big college football game this week. We're going to talk about a debate that's been going on Twitter to get some other opinions here of how things are going with that. Of course, college basketball is underway, and Jay's going to give us a recap of when he headed over to the Breeders' Cup. But first, Brett, let's start here with a big week in Pennsylvania. As you guys well know, there has been gambling, sports betting going on in Pennsylvania. We talked to Jess Wellman about that on our sister podcast on LSR, but things are really cranking up over there now.
Yes, finally. DraftKings Sportsbook is fully operational in the state of Pennsylvania. They joined FanDuel, Fox Bet, BetRivers, and Parx as online sports betting operators there. So if you're a sports bettor in PA, you now have access to the full array of betting options that bettors in New Jersey and Indiana have been able to enjoy at DraftKings, which is certainly one of the better mobile betting apps on the market in the U.S. right now. So very exciting news there. FanDuel has some competition, which we love to see. So good news, I think, for everybody who bets on sports and anybody who's in the industry in Pennsylvania this week. Yeah, no,
absolutely. And if you guys are going to take advantage of DraftKings opening up there in Pennsylvania, of course, head over to the Lines first before you do that and take advantage of the offer we have going on over there. Because, again, free money is good. You have a $25 free offer at DraftKings as well as a $200 risk-free bet. So be sure and take advantage of all of those things that the sports books are going to give us, because we don't get those very often. So definitely want to take advantage of all of the ways that we can go about it. But yeah, and we have about a week away for even the casino players, Brett. There are some people who bet on sports who like to play on the casino side as well. And there is even a casino coming here in about a week that apparently is going to have the biggest menu of options for the people of Pennsylvania to choose from with Unibet.
Yeah, that's right. That's Unibet. Unibet on the way as well. And
apparently like 170 something games or something like that they're going to have.
Yeah, that's pretty expensive.
Yeah, it's like 100 more than the next biggest competitor or something like that. And if you've ever tried to play online poker in Nevada, whenever you've been over here, another one of the things that is pretty sad for me anyway. Maybe Jay, I don't know if you've played on WSOP.com out here or whatever, but PokerStars has been live in Pennsylvania for all of 3 days, and it's like already bigger than WSOP is in Nevada. Like it's like 3 days deep, and it's already bigger than what we have to play with over here.
Yeah, I had in the past played on WSOP.com, but I knew when they were making inroads to potentially get it there that they would have a pretty good turnout, and it sounds like their online will exceed Nevada's numbers as it turns out.
Yeah, absolutely. That is good news over there. And then maybe, Brett, we can get to one day where there is some sort of pact between the states. Yes. I mean, there is between Nevada and New Jersey, but from my understanding, and I understand you're not the Pennsylvania expert, but from my understanding, Pennsylvania has just been a little weary about kind of going that route with the ambiguity of what is still out there with the whole Wire Act stuff.
Yeah, that's what I've read too. I don't think there's any rush. I don't think they're in any rush to join that liquidity pool. So that'll be something to watch, because if that does happen, you've got the trio of New Jersey, Nevada, and Pennsylvania. You had Delaware in there as well. But if that's a growing liquidity pool, and
Absolutely.
other states are going to look at that and say, all right, well, we see what's happening here. Let's look into it a little bit more.
And as we all know, all of us that played online growing up, the key to everything in poker is liquidity. If you log on and you want to play in a sit and go real quick and you can't get that thing to fill in a few minutes, you get bored and you move on. And you got to have people that are logging in and playing at all times to be able to really have a successful product. So hopefully we get to the point where that is what we have with these various states that have legalized online poker. Jay, when we last talked to you last week you were heading over to California. You were going to the Breeders' Cup. How was that? What went on? Did you win some money? What's going on with that?
It was a losing weekend. However, most enjoyable. I was in and out pretty quick, and I got in there and had a pass thanks to Brett. We really a great event and venue to take in the Breeders' Cup, and I saw that the 2-day event brought in a record handle of 174 million. They started the 2-day Breeders' Cup back in 2007 when they went to the 2-day format, and it sounds like betting was brisk, and they took in some real big numbers. Despite hitting the long shot at a minimum wager on the aptly named Storm the Court, 45-1 won the juvenile, and I had to win in place on them. I still managed to have a losing day on Friday, and was betting a little bit more on some guys that do pretty well, and there were some good long shots, and that's the beauty of the Breeders' Cup is there's more opportunities to hit. There's 13-1, 14-1s coming in. There's bigger fields, and that's the key to be able to cash in. Saturday, I not only went to the Breeders' Cup, and again, I was able to get in. I got great pictures. I'm in back by the barns as they're loading prior to getting in the paddock and getting some real good opportunities to see the horses up close. And it's quite a beautiful day at Sanity. But I went from there, and we'll cover some of this in the college football, but I managed to get over to the LA Coliseum to see Oregon and USC play that night as well. And so it was a great weekend. Breeders' Cup, if you haven't been, whether you like horses or not, the World Championships are something to take in, and it's really a tremendous event.
Brett, you let us know you got in on the horse racing streets this weekend.
I am ashamed. No, I'm not ashamed. Because I lost money, I am sad to report that I bet on every single race on Saturday, including the finale. I was getting bets down as I was refrigerator shopping at Lowe's. You might call that degenerate behavior, but I went into the day with I'm going to bet on all 9 races today. And I am not a quitter, so I continued betting all the way through. I got that done, but I only made money on one race. I had Iridessa at 13-1 to win. Other than that, it was a disaster. But I had a lot of fun, not because I enjoy the horse racing part of it, but I find pari-mutuel horse betting just fascinating. The whole thing is really cool. So I like partaking in that for the big events.
Yeah, I always look at it from a standpoint of you have to just kind of understand what you're getting into whenever you get going. This is actually something we'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about this whole debate over closing line value that's going on out there. But, listen, you get into horse racing 9 times out of 10, you're not following it at all, except for the time that you've decided that you're going to bet on whatever the event is that is going on. So you have to just view it as recreational fun. And once you just kind of get past that you don't have any sort of expectation of ROI, then it really does become a super, super fun sweat. So if you can get past the fact that oh man, if I don't win, I'm going to be really pissed off. Well, that's just not the nature of the beast. You're doing no research. You're not having anything that's going on there. You're basically popping in and just, renting some entertainment real quick. I think that horse racing is pretty fun from that aspect. And Jay, I imagine that's kind of how you viewed it whenever you went over to California, right? It's just hey, this is more of an entertainment expense as opposed to any sort of ROI gambling proposition.
Yes, but I also, just like the sports betting, there's so many good shows. There's plenty of free content out there. And if you find guys that are good at their craft and really dig in, and maybe guys that study the videos and past races and can at least give you somewhat of an edge, then you have an opportunity to potentially win and increase your chances. But I think you're totally right. You have to be maybe look at it as a recreational. Horse racing is fun. It's fun to watch them and see your horse maybe come in by a head or a neck or lose by, and you hear a lot of the screaming and yelling and the enjoyment that's going on. But then those that take it seriously are certainly in there to look for value, look for the opportunity for a big score. And I think that's the key with horse racing. I always say it's like betting the 6 to 8 team parlay in a sports bet. That's kind of what the trifectas and the supers are. You're trying to hit a big score and a long shot, and the odds are against you, and the takeout is high. But I have some guys that really are into it and study it, and so I had some information that was provided to me and some handicappers, and I was still unable to provide a profit this week through them. But that's the way it goes, and it's like you said, if you're looking at more recreational and you're not going to overload yourself on the betting amount, then you should be able to enjoy it.
Brett, we have college basketball underway. I was actually on air over at VSiN the other night on Tuesday night, where we had college football, college basketball, hockey, NBA, all going at the same time. I was bouncing all over the place trying to figure out how to monitor it all. But we did have the top 4 teams in the country take the court on opening night.
Yeah, a huge week in college sports. Obviously, there's Bama, LSU, which we'll get into in a little bit. But also, like you said, the college basketball season opened this week with that doubleheader that featured the top 4 ranked teams. Duke beating Kansas 66-64, I believe. And then that second game, Kentucky knocked off the preseason number 1 Michigan State. So we got a little taste of some potential Final Four or Elite 8 matchups in March. But we just ran a story this morning by Bobby Gonzalez, who's a former college hoops coach at Seton Hall in Manhattan. He says that the parity in college basketball has reached a new level. There could be some opportunities in some of the longer shots on the futures board right now. So I think that's definitely interesting. If you look at maybe some of the the second tier teams with a little some upperclassmen who have been through this before. I think it's going to be a really interesting college basketball year. Last year it was all Duke and the big recruiting class they had, and they fell apart in March. And I think there's something to learn from that.
Yeah, if you take a look just at the futures odds over at DraftKings right now, the biggest favorite is Duke, but Duke and Kentucky, they're still plus 600, right? So, 6-1 is the lowest odds you're getting for an NCAA basketball champion here. And, I would do this typically the same way that I would do any of these deals here is if I had an inkling on a team that I thought had a real shot and they were a super long shot, then that would be where I would kind of go in and try to get involved. But Jay, last year I got involved on Virginia. I think Brett, you remember this. I got involved in Virginia pretty late in the game. Still got them at 8-1 to win it all when Virginia was had shown the cards that they were pretty much one of the 4 best teams and one of the 4 most likely teams to be able to actually get it done here. So if I'm not getting 20-1 or better on something like this, I probably am just going to hang out and try and hit something in that 8, 9, 10-1, like way, way down the line after I've got a further evaluation of these teams. Yeah,
let me give you an example from last season. And I had a really good postseason tournament in the NCAA. But last year, I made a futures bet at 75-1 on Texas Tech, and I rode them through the tournament. But I made it before they played Kansas in January, and the next day after they had beaten them, they were down 45-1. I had a friend sending me a ticket, said he was proud that he got 45-1, and we had a good laugh because I played them at 75-1 prior, and that was a team that had a really good defense. It turns out they really turned the corner. So there's opportunities on even top teams, even teams that maybe ranked top 30 through the season that you can get some value during the season, and maybe because they're either struggling early on and then they got some guys that are coming back from injury or academically eligible later in the season. And those are kind of the value opportunities you're looking. But again, I won't play these teams that are top notch, that are 10-1 or less. There's literally no value to me in those teams. And a good example as well would be Duke last year was very heavily regarded. And they not only didn't win the NCAA tournament, but they didn't make the Final Four. And remember, they were real short odds as supposedly the superior team going into the season, and it just didn't materialize.
And Brett,
I think
this is a good time. Go ahead.
I was going to say the trend that we've seen over the past few years is experience matters. Virginia took that veteran-laden team to the title last year. Villanova before that, without any big superstars. That's the trend that has kind of taken over college hoops recently. So I think those are the kinds of teams you need to be looking for early in the season. Yeah, and that's kind of where I was going with this. Is that it's pretty much one of those things where you kind of forget until it rolls around whenever you're looking at this. But it's a one and done tournament, right? We're talking one and done here. You go out and you have one bad night, or your superstar just has his one off night. And that's the end of your ride here. And you go out, and especially in basketball of all sports,
you could just face a team that is on fire. And we've seen that in the NCAA tournament as well, to where it wasn't even necessarily that the higher seed played all that badly. It was just that the lower seed just was on complete fire. We've seen these guys just nail 3-pointers and shoot at this ungodly rate in the tournament and get some of these huge upsets. And so, Jay, I think that's also something that lends to your point here. When you look at these 50, 60, 70 to 1 type teams, you don't have to win that many games in a row, and the field in front of you starts to get cleared out a little bit because some of these upsets happen along the bracket along the way as well.
Yeah, there's a real thin line between the top teams that are not quite getting the odds. And the last year an example would be Purdue, who I think tied for the Big Ten regular season title, but they weren't as highly regarded going into the tournament, and their odds were less. And remember, they were just, overtime. The guard had the tremendous game when they got beat by Texas Tech. I think it was an overtime and in the tournament. And they were a relative long shot, all things considered, going into that tournament, and yet they were a very solid and fundamentally good team, and like I said, co-champs of the regular season in the Big Ten. And there's just such a thin line between, say, a Purdue or a team that's going to have shorter odds like a Michigan State when you get in that one-and-done format. And then it also, of course, comes down to not only the seeding, but the matchups as they play out throughout the tournament and what teams are getting knocked off. So I just think before the season you're not going to get much opportunity. If you take a chance on a long shot, 70, 80, 100 to 1, then maybe if they get off to a good start, you have a chance on some of these prop swaps and others to maybe get it out there and turn a little profit, but you're not going to be able to do it on the bigger favorites.
Yeah, just to give you guys the full breakdown here of the kind of the brand name teams here: Duke 600, Kentucky 600, Carolina 900, Michigan State 1,000, Kansas 1,200, Louisville 1,400, Memphis 1,600, Gonzaga 1,800, and then Virginia 1,800. Every team past that, more than 20 to 1 or better out there in the futures odds over at DraftKings right now. So pretty interesting stuff, and super glad to have yet another sport for us to follow and talk about here on the podcast and try to wrap my brain around here, man. It seems like as soon as I feel like I'm getting a handle on something else, there's something else that pops up that I've got to try and get a handle on as well. But it'll be fun. We'll talk about college basketball season, of course, as the season rolls on here. Speaking of college basketball season, actually, Brett, I think this is a good time that we can go ahead and pump a little news out there. We were talking about the DraftKings Sports Betting Championship. You were the first over at TheLines to have something up with some actual real information that we had gotten from Johnny Avello, and now we've gotten additional information from Johnny Avello about this event here, and it actually is not going to take place in December like they had targeted.
Yeah, unfortunate, because we talked about it, being the perfect weekend to have it, a full weekend of college football and NFL and every other sport that's going on. Now, it sounds like it's going to be pushed back to March, which kind of runs into March Madness. You still have NBA, you still have NHL, but no football if this DraftKings Sportsbook or Sports Betting National Championship does happen in 2020. Yeah,
it's a little bit of a bummer from my standpoint, because I don't think now it would be something I would play in because I'm just a much better college football and NFL guy than I am really any of the other sports out there, other than kind of like NBA props. But I mean, I guess I don't think I'm going to win a sports betting championship betting NBA props, but I don't know, maybe
probably not.
Maybe I could, but I don't think that's going to happen. And so a little bit of a bummer to me. The other thing that Johnny mentioned as well, which I do think could help in getting the getting the entries up with it not being a football contest. He said they're at least toying around with the idea of lowering the buy-in to $5K as opposed to $10K. And Jay, I don't know how you feel about it. I mean, there was some overlay last year, even when it was only football and it was $10K. I think this year, if they do lower it to $5K, and I think that it's almost necessary if you're gonna do it outside of football season.
And not only then increase the number of participants, but you're giving more people an opportunity to not only get involved, but widespread over the number of sports, like you said. And I think it opens up the arena a little bit more for more players. And you also, I think, as a promoter or someone like DraftKings that's doing that, when you open up to more players, you're also going to then be able to promote the cross sports and the more sports, because you're going to have guys that maybe are specializing that wouldn't have otherwise played, and they're going to have an opportunity with some more sports being offered to do that.
We have a big, dare I say massive, college football game that is going on this weekend. I guess it's not technically number 1 versus number 2 anymore because of the college football playoff rankings that came out, which actually had these teams at 2 and 3. But LSU heads to Tuscaloosa to play Alabama this week. And Brett, from the information you've gotten so far, it looks like the Tigers are getting a lot of love here.
That is pretty interesting. That's according to data from FanDuel Sportsbook so far. That is, of course, it's early in the week. You know, most of the money's going to come in on Friday and Saturday. But yes, 72% of the bets, 58% of the money coming in on LSU right now. And could that be because of the uncertainty of Tua? Could that be because of the way Joe Burrow has looked? I mean, this is a Alabama team that has pretty much dominated this series over the past, how long has this gone on?
Yeah, the better part of a decade. It's been ungood. It's
8 straight, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been ungood. And the biggest problem here for me is it's almost like you have to throw out. You almost have to throw out everything that's happened over the last. I mean, the teams, those LSU teams are so completely different from this LSU team that it's almost incomparable here. The only thing that's really the same is that Nick Saban is still over at Alabama. I mean, even Alabama was a team that was just kind of like a better version of LSU, where they played unbelievable defense, but the offense was always kind of lacking when you looked at it compared to some of the other teams out there in the country. And now they have this high-powered offense to go along with, what is just also just a mammoth defense. And LSU now on the flip side has a kind of suspect defense to go along with an offensive juggernaut here, which is kind of the complete role reversal for this LSU team here. Jay, would you ever have imagined in all of this LSU Alabama rivalry, could you have imagined a scenario where we are looking at it, and it was even higher 2 days ago, a total of 63 points in an LSU Alabama game? It was 65 2 days ago, but 63 points for an LSU Alabama game.
No, yeah, you're seeing a different, obviously, look with the pro style of LSU. Right now, the number 2 passing team in the country. Both these teams are top 4 in the country in passing, total yards. Alabama's just outside the top 5. LSU is inside, and so. Yeah, you wouldn't have seen that in years past, and that's part of the change with LSU's philosophy, which gets down to how are they going to be able to attack an Alabama defense. It's not as good as in recent years, certainly statistically, but again, with both teams in the extra week of prep, it's hard to go against Saban knowing at home with that extra time to prepare for and have that look at LSU's offense to prepare. That's difficult, but I have not made a bet, and I thought for certain I'd be taking the underdog, but don't feel quite as confident right now. But if I'm going to play it, that's still the side I'm looking, and I just got to see, again, looking at first half options as well. But defensively, boy, that total is higher than we would have certainly imagined going into the season.
Can't even imagine. That is just, for me to see a 6 out there, in front of an LSU Alabama game. And like we said, this thing was at 65 just a couple of days ago. We've seen it fall about a day and a half ago to 64, then bottom out at 63, where it is kind of right
65.
now.
65. The last 3 years, there were 73 points combined.
I know.
In this series. It's just, it's baffling. But yeah, it's just a completely different LSU team than we've seen the last, I don't even know how long.
Yeah, and you look at the way that this spread has gone, opened at 6.5, immediately bet to 5.5, then back to 6.5 over at DraftKings, and then now it's kind of toggled between 6 and 6.5 over the last day or so to where we sit right now at 6, and it looks like it's probably going to settle there, at least for the time being. About going on 7.5 hours now that this thing is sat at 6 and hasn't moved off of that number there. Brett, as you take a look at this game and you want to go about kind of handicapping it, I'll fully admit to our listeners, it's kind of hard for me to do. I'm blinded as an LSU fan. I have the trauma of Nick Saban kicking our ass for a decade burned in my brain. And so even though I see what this LSU offense does with my eyes, it's hard for me to shake just the memories of the last 10 years, essentially. So how do you look at this game? How do you cap this game? Do you think 6 points are too many, not enough? What's going on?
I think it's pretty fair. If anything, I'm looking at the total. I like the under here. I think Nick Saban's going to want to slow this game down to their pace. So I could see this playing out. Certainly not what we've seen the last 3 years in this series, but I think this is going to go well under 65 and now what was 63. And it is, I mean, look, it is the total is falling for a reason. I mean, that's kind of the way it's trending. And I could see this falling even further because I think that the opener there was just way too high.
Jay, this whole, obviously, and you mentioned when you were talking about it, I mean, like the whole Tua situation has really kind of put a cloud. I would say, I'm not going to say put a cloud over this game from a hype standpoint, because obviously it's everything all sports talk radio and all the sports programs are talking about. But from a betting perspective, I was even talking to a couple of bookmakers who said they haven't seen quite the action on this yet that they would have expected. And certainly they said it would be double or triple what it is right now if there been just, some sort of even inkling that he was definitely going to play or whatever. Do you feel like, and I have this weird theory, and I'd love to hear what you think about this, but I have this weird theory that it might be better for LSU if a 70% or 75% Tua is under center than if they were to go with a backup quarterback in this situation. What say you?
I would agree. And the thing about Tua is you got to believe he's going to play, first of all. And you got to also think he's under wraps with what they're totally disclosing here. They're not going to put him out there if he's not healthy, but I'll say completely healthy, but he's certainly not going to be maybe 100%. And yet I would say, you'd rather maybe potentially see him if he's not quite ready, and the rust factor maybe not being, and now having to play in just a big game coming back without having played in recent weeks. And I think to point a couple points in Brett's favor is not only do both these teams allow 4.5 and 4.4 yards per play defensively, and they've got 500-yard offenses on both sides, but the fact that the situation with Tua is a little questionable, and I think a good point taken that even if he is in there and maybe not quite 100%, they're probably going to go to the ground more, and even with the playmakers on the outside, they're going to probably try to control the ball, clock, and change, like Brett said, and that's the intriguing part of kind of looking at it. And I don't think there's any doubt when this total was set, it was inflated a little bit, so the value and some of the sharper bettors are probably looking that way. But I think it's another game that, because of the question marks going in, that's why in-game betting is so appealing to so many people now. You can get a look at how that's playing out early on and maybe make some adjustments and try to stay ahead of the game and the numbers in in-game betting. Yeah,
the only bet I have in my account is an under bet on this. Didn't get it at the full 65, but did get it at 64.5, which I'm not too upset about there at all, and mainly for the same reasons that everything that you guys just pointed out here. I mean, I understand two high-powered offenses here, but if anything, if this goes south for LSU, then they're just not going to put points on the board really kind of at all. I think that this is not one of those situations where this is a firefight here. I don't think this is a shootout. I think that if LSU wins this game and keeps it within the 6, we're probably looking at a more kind of grinded out type situation here. I don't think that this is going to be LSU going out and lighting up the scoreboard like they have against most of the people this year. Alabama's defense is just too good, just too stout. And I mean, look, they came out with the Athletic came out with their first mock draft of the year, and 14 of the first rounders were from the SEC, and 11 of those were between LSU and Alabama. You know, I mean, it's absurd. We're looking at a team with just a massive amount of NFL talent, on both sides of the ball here. And so for me, if this number, I will say this, if for whatever reason this number if LSU starts getting a ton of steam and this thing drops even another, if there's any way this thing gets to 4, which I don't think it possibly could, but let's say maybe Tua re-injures his ankle today at practice and we don't know about it, and this thing gets to 4 or something like that, I think I'd probably look to take Alabama at home in this situation, and I would just be happy to lose the bet because LSU would have won at that point. But I think I would take Alabama at home here because, again, I don't think having Tua out there at less than 100% is really that big of a deal for Alabama. I mean, it's still a team surrounded by 4 and 5 stars all over the field here, and on the defensive side of the ball, like we said, I mean, it's just completely loaded. Yeah, hypothetically, what would the line be if Tua was for whatever reason rolled out on Friday, maybe Saturday morning? What would the line move to? Yeah, I mean, would it move, Jay? Would it move a full 2 points? You think?
I have power ratings, and yet I can't. Yeah, I think yes, but I don't. Mm-hmm. You're not going to see it drop below 4. I don't believe.
Interesting stuff here. Of course, we will all be watching this, as will the rest of the nation.
One other comment I'll make is just in looking at the numbers, and as you look at the totals, LSU's toughest conference road game was at Mississippi State, where they had 413 yards of offense, and yeah, they piled it up on Texas, which is really a bad defense on the road earlier this season. But, that's kind of the big game environment, the familiarity, and going on the road here. Joe Burrow has really been a story this season. And if he performs at a high level, he's got to be considered moving up again if he really has a big game. But that's where your guys' points on the potentially less scoring here is that if they went to Mississippi State just a few weeks ago and didn't reach near their season average, and then last week at Auburn, or last 2 weeks ago, last game against Auburn, 23-20, you'd have to think that this is not going to get to that inflated total.
Absolutely here. All right, guys, one of the things before we look at Week 10 real quick that I want to talk about, there's been a debate on Twitter in sports betting, talking about closing line value. Does it matter? Where does it sit in value and to a sports bettor and stuff? And, there's the CLV doesn't matter camp, and then there's the of course it matters, it's like the most important thing camp. And Brett, I actually kind of think that the answer is that they're both right, because it depends on what you're doing when it all comes down to closing line value. If you're a pro bettor, then yeah, of course, like closing line value matters, and what the closing line is compared to the opening line and all of that completely matters. But if you're in the business of kind of what you and I do, and Jay to an extent as well, where we're putting out information that really caters to the masses and not necessarily sharp pro bettors and things like that, then yeah, actually closing line value does not matter at all. And I think both sides of this can be right, because if you're a casual bettor, most casual bettors are not looking to make bets on a Tuesday. They're not looking to make bets on a Wednesday. They're not forecasting where the line might move between now and kickoff and all those things. Most guys are getting together and they're maybe on a Saturday watching a video or listening to our podcast or listening to some videos or reading some articles or something like that. But most of the time it's probably Sunday morning right before the games kick off when they decide to make their bets. And so what the closing line value is to, I would say, 90% of bettors out there is really irrelevant, because it's not going to be anything that ever really comes into play for the masses. Yeah, look, sharp bettors try to get the best number on a side regardless of when it is posted, with the goal of beating the closing line. So, I mean, they can really determine the quality of their bet by comparing it to closing, where the action closes, and books have balanced action to the best of their ability. If you're beating the closing line, you're ahead of the market and in a better position to beat the books long term. Most casuals, like you said, don't even look at a line until like an hour or two before it closes. So why would that matter? So I'm with you. I think both. You can make an argument for both it being right for both sides. So yeah, it really depends on who you're talking about. Yeah, I think it's where you sit on this, Jay. I mean, I make videos for the lines and play picks, and I highlight all of the standalone games, that the Thursday night football, the Sunday night football, Monday night football, and stuff. And I'll make the video, and then I'll in the comment section, inevitably someone will be like, oh yeah, but I mean, you could have got this at 3 or you could have got this at 4.5 if you. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm not making the video for that. Like, that's not what it's about. This, like, the people who are watching these videos and the people who are going in and trying to get kind of some last minute advice, you pretty much have to talk about the games in the state that they stand at that time, and not like when you're talking to the masses of sports betting out there. And listen, education process will get people more keen on all of these things that you and I and Brett and stuff look for. But let's just be honest. I mean, we were talking a year ago, there was one state where you could friggin' bet. And like, here we are now with a whole bunch of new states and a whole bunch of very infantile sports bettors coming into the market. And we're trying to explain what a teaser is and you know, what a key number is, much less like closing line value. I think that this argument is kind of like getting beat to death over something where both sides are right. Like, yeah, if you're doing this for a living or if you're doing this super seriously and you're trying to make a ton of money sports betting, then sure, CLV certainly matters. But I think you also at the same time have to understand that for the masses, that closing line value not only does it not matter, it actually never even comes into play.
You're covering a lot of good points, and I'll never debate that getting the best numbers is important and certainly is going to, over the long term, make you some extra money and save you dollars as well. So getting the best of the number and trying to do that. You know, I had it last week by 4 points in a total move on the Packers Chargers over, and it didn't even sniff. So it doesn't matter in certain points. And another thing I'll comment, it depends on the sport. Because I have some real strong numbers in the NFL and competitively lined games, whether you're, you know, laying 3.5 or 4, guess what? If you have the straight up winner in a competitively lined game, you're going to cover it over 90% of the time. How about 81-9 against the spread when you either have the outright winner on an underdog in a competitively lined game of 6 or less, or the favorite, whether it's 2, 4, 5, they're going to win and cover a high percentage of the time. But I will say that I've contacted and been in touch with a number of sportsbook directors, and certainly on the show that you're on as well. At VSiN, Nick Bogdanovich from William Hill was on recently about the college basketball in this early season, literally calling it a crapshoot, and you're going to see line moves of 4 or 5 points, even up to 10 points on some of the totals. So yeah, if you can get the best number and really get in when there's big line movements, it definitely makes a difference. But for the most people that can't either get their money down or are not studying and handicapping and can't do that, then you've got to make the decision on, are you going to play it, and also be disciplined to not chase the steam, and certainly try not to bet the bad numbers. But if you can get a reasonable number that you feel is still based on your numbers and research is within reason, or maybe you thought they were off because Nick Bogdanovich admits that they're off on a lot of these college basketball numbers early season, making it more beatable for the bettors, then you have a better chance.
And Brett, I think the last thing, we can kind of put a bow on this, and I don't want to go too into it. I just think that, you know, I think a lot of people are kind of arguing in circles because the answer is you're both right, essentially. But, you know, the other thing too is like, okay, let's look at some of these other states as well. Like, let's look at a state like New York. Let's look at a state like Mississippi. Some of these states that are legalizing sports betting and getting new sports bettors involved, but there isn't mobile betting. I mean, are you going to get guys taking multiple trips to the casino to go make bets? Of course not. So like the thought of a closing line value for those guys is pretty much non-existent as well, because you're not going to get a guy to drive down on a Tuesday because he thinks the line's going to be better than if he went on a Thursday or Friday or whenever the hell it is that he's going to make his bet and stuff. So like you kind of have to look at it from that standpoint as well. So I mean, you know, look, yeah, a lot of the content that we make and a lot of the numbers that we talk about might be stale and might be numbers that are, you know, not the same as a better number you could have got at opening, or a number that, you know, is not as favorable. But we still have to, you know, the general fact of the matter here is that the majority of people that are betting are not pros. They're not dudes that are out there trying to like turn a huge ROI and turn a huge profit. They're just trying to feel a little bit better about the bet they're probably going to make anyway, right? I mean, like they're going into watching these videos or reading these articles or whatever it might be with a preconceived notion of which way they're leaning as it is anyway, but they just kind of want to be reinforced as it is. And so, you know, I think that that's kind of something I think that, you know, if you're too in the bubble, maybe you don't understand about it all.
Yeah, just to give our audience the dilemma we have as content producers and people trying to get information out there, we try to get this info out as early as possible in the week for many reasons, but things are changing constantly with news and odds throughout the week. So it's really tough for us to balance that part of it. And I know, Matt, it's even more difficult for you doing videos because those are not easy to edit. Like I can go in and edit a story and, provide updates that way. You're posting videos the day of for the most part, because I mean, that's when the information is up to date. You can't really do a video about a game early in the week unless you're doing another one later in the week, because so many things have changed. So it is a tough balance for us. And it really does. You're right. I mean, closing lines matter to some, but for the majority, it doesn't.
All right, let's take a look.
I'll comment one more thing is, and it's part of our education process and what we do and provide listeners information is to always, and sometimes later in the week, why you maybe are waiting. And a lot of it is injury related. And Patrick Mahomes' situation this week is a good example. If you want to get ahead of the number and anticipate whether he's going to play, you can make those numbers. But at this time of year, I'll comment on football, is that with totals, you can make a simple, you can be ahead of the numbers, especially on totals, by simply looking at the weather reports early in the week and trying to anticipate, hey, there's going to be a little worse weather. The total sitting at 48, it's going to come down. So if you want to bet a better number, just anticipate that, because too often on the Friday, Saturday, and then game day, you see these totals just getting slammed down. And if you would have just spent a part of the day on Thursday looking at the weather reports, you would have known that it's going to probably drop. And that's another way just to be on top of that, and part of the education we try to provide.
All right, so let's take a quick look here at Week 10, Brett. Look, it's an interesting week, I think, overall, but I mean, a lot of these games I don't have super strong opinions on. I mean, I think my card is going to look fairly bare this week, to be perfectly honest, when I kind of look up and down the board here. Is there any game that jumps off the page to you as something that you did feel like is you have a pretty strong position on?
Well, I don't want to give away too much, because this is a lot of what we talk about on our Friday show. And then there will be, I do have strong leans on 3 or 4 games. So we'll definitely get into that.
Let's get your strongest opinion then of the week, and then we'll tease that you can listen in to the Circa Pod tomorrow.
My strongest opinion is on the Steelers plus 3.5 at home against the Rams. This is a Steelers team that I have backed for several weeks. I feel like they've been undervalued since the start of the season. A lot of that is because they've played so horribly, but this is a very talented defense that has finally come together. The best pass rush in the NFL, according to DVOA and Pro Football Focus. And here they are facing one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. And Pittsburgh can come at you in every angle with that pass rush. So Jared Goff on the road against this pass rush, I think the Rams are really going to struggle in this game, and I'm seeing a lot of money and bets coming in on the Rams, and I think it's a really juicy spot for the Steelers.
Jay, what do you think about these primetime games here, the ones that are going to draw the most action? And look, they're some of the best games of the week here. Vikings and Cowboys and Seahawks and 49ers. Vikings currently 3-point dogs on the road at the Cowboys. If you're looking at the lines over at DraftKings, Seahawks 6.5-point dogs on the road at the 49ers.
Yeah, my initial haven't bet them, and those two in particular, Vikings is still my lean on that side. You hear a lot of the discussion about Cousins, and he hasn't performed in the big games or against winning teams, and yeah, I get that, but still would be the balance and the stronger defense, I think, for the Vikings. The Seattle game is going to drop maybe the most bets of the week. And if Russell Wilson hasn't proven that he's well deserving of MVP at this point with what he's been able to do, he's just carrying this team. And now they've added the weapon of a Sanders on wide receiver to help their offense even more. But the 49ers have been obviously the best story of the season, I think, going in now undefeated. And I thought, it looked like I can see why the number's gone up. Let's put it that way. And back to getting the best number, I didn't play San Francisco, and that's the side I would have supported. And I don't think Seattle's going to be able to go in there. I said this weeks ago on this program. I thought Seattle wasn't as good as their record. They're finding ways to win, and they did it again last week and screwed me. I had the Bucks +6 early in the week, bet them more +5, and they get it done in overtime, win by 6. But I'm in agreement with Brett on the Steelers. I also believe that the Rams just a number, maybe even a month ago, we weren't certain their offense and their offensive line was as worthy. So I think the Steelers is a good play. I'm also playing the Lions this week, took 3, see some 2.5, and we'll definitely tease them up as well. And then the game that has me a little intrigued is not from what I think is a matchup, but the Bengals coming off a bye, now the only winless team. I know sharps are going to be on them, and you may not see the line move. And one of the matchups that I have a real hard time playing Cincinnati is in their first meeting, they gave up like 240 rushing yards and covered against Baltimore in a 6-point loss. They got there with a backdoor, but it's so hard for me when I know that the matchups are awful. This is the best rushing team against the worst rushing team from a yards per game perspective. And yeah, you're laying a big number on the road. And I'm still trying to find every reason to take the Bengals here. And really, I think their home run spot with off the bye division game, trying to get that first win, and the Baltimore coming off the game against the Patriots. So I think is a big dog there. Positioned right, but the fundamentals don't work, and that's why I'm struggling with that one.
I love that one too. I love the Bengals this week.
Oh, good Lord. I actually only have 3 bets in my account as we sit right now. For whatever reason, all my numbers point to the over in this Bills-Browns game. It has been that this, we know for sure that the Browns give up points, but I actually think that this Bills defense is a little bit bloated due to the competition that they've been playing here. And my numbers kind of have this coming in actually way off of where it sits at 40 right now and coming in at 43.5. And so if I'm getting 43.5 on a game that's sitting at 40 right now, I'm going to take the over in that just about every single time. So sitting with the over in that game, I think that total is way too low. The other bet in my account here is the over in another game that doesn't seem like maybe it should be over, but in this Dolphins-Colts game, it's sitting at 44. And one thing we know is Ryan Tannehill will throw the hell out of the ball. He'll push it downfield. He is not afraid to air it out. He's YOLO situation for him. He knows his job isn't his. And so it doesn't really matter to me that Preston Williams is out. I mean, I think that it's kind of just fill in receiver here, and he's going to just throw and throw and throw and throw and throw. And we've seen this Colts defense kind of break down over the course of the last month as well. So 44. And that one seems a little bit too low. And the only other bet in my account here, and maybe Bruce Arians will bite me in the ass, but I have the Bucks as a much, much better team than their record shows. A couple of unlucky situations for them. And I have them winning at home against this Cardinals team way more than 4.5 points here. I understand the Cardinals have started to look a little bit better, but I have this Bucks team winning this game pretty easily, actually. So, Brett, jump in and tell me which one of those you hate.
None.
All right.
Can you believe that?
I know. I
love that Bucks play too. We'll be talking about that one tomorrow for sure.
Good deal. Guys, thanks for tuning in this week. And as always, we are on all your popular podcasting, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google. Go in, give us a subscription, subscribe, rate, and review as always, and follow us on the Twitter machine at TheLines US, at PlayPicksUS. For Brett, for Jay, I'm Matt. Talk to you guys next week.